So I'll bet you want to optimize your health, extend your longevity, and biohack your way to a better life. But how do you know what actually works? Ads promising to boost energy or reverse aging are everywhere. Yet behind those glossy claims, there's often little real science. What if there were a way to cut through the noise, personalize the findings, and create a system that works specifically for you? That's the essence of rational biohacking. Taking control of your health through personalized experimentation grounded in science and logic. Today, we'll explore how to biohack smarter, not harder, using a framework that blends curiosity with critical thinking. I'm Dr. Hilary Lynn, and today we're tackling biohacking. Is it a legitimate practice or actually dangerous? So I trained and conducted research at Stanford and Columbia, institutions known for their rigorous approach to science, which is absolutely necessary when it comes to creating new evidence for health and medicine. But over the years, I've grown frustrated with the limitations of traditional research. Too often, studies are constrained by funding priorities, institutional politics, and a publishing system that doesn't always align with real world health needs. That's why I'm passionate about empowering individuals to take care of their health in their own hands. That's why I'm passionate about empowering people to take their health into their own hands, but in a way that's deliberate, rational, and informed by the scientific method. So today we'll dive into why people biohack, what self-experimentation really means, and why it's so important to approach it with a rational mindset. And by the end, you'll have clear next steps and a framework for designing your own rational biohacking experiments and avoiding common pitfalls. So at its core, biohacking is about agency. It's a way for people to take control of their health, optimize performance, and for many, extend their lifespan. Whether it's finding more energy to tackle daily life, addressing specific health concerns, or pushing the boundaries of physical and mental performance, biohacking is driven by a desire for better. And for me, as a longevity physician, biohacking is also about overcoming the gaps in traditional healthcare and scientific research. Coming from rigorous scientific environments, I've seen firsthand how much potentially groundbreaking research never gets funded or published because it doesn't fit neatly into existing priorities. On top of that, studies often overlook the uniqueness of individuals, which means that as doctors, we frequently need to adjust interventions for each person while still relying on broader scientific findings as a general guide. Biohacking offers a way to explore questions that institutions can't or won't address, tailoring solutions to individual needs rather than relying on one-size-fits-all answers. But biohacking has its challenges. Too often, it's dismissed as reckless or unscientific because many people dive into trends without understanding the underlying science or tracking their outcomes properly. This lack of structure leads to wasted resources, frustration, and in some cases, even harm. I've had too many patients come to me after trying some miracle biohacking intervention only to suffer devastating side effects that took serious effort to unravel and reverse. And that's why rational biohacking is so critical. It combines the adventurous spirit of experimentation with the disciplined mindset of a scientist. This approach ensures that you're not just trying things blindly, but asking the right questions, designing deliberate experiments, and relying on evidence to guide your decisions. Rational biohacking isn't about chasing quick fixes. It's about building a thoughtful process to make informed choices, track your progress, and refine your approach over time. Instead of jumping from one trend to another, you create a system that helps you discover what truly works for your unique body, goals, and lifestyle. This deliberate framework is the foundation of everything we explore in longevity, and it helps you transform your curiosity into actionable insights and move closer to your health. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the rational biohacking framework, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. Scrolling through social media or browsing Amazon can feel like stepping into an endless list of promises. The longevity and wellness market is a multi-trillion-dollar industry saturated with products, services, and influencers competing for your attention. From supplements that claim to reverse aging to devices promising to boost your mitochondrial function and protocols marketed as guaranteed to detox your body. It's a whirlwind of options. But behind many of these shining offerings lies a pervasive problem. That of pseudoscience. So what is pseudoscience? Pseudoscience refers to claims, beliefs, or practices that are presented as scientific, but lack empirical evidence and are not based on the scientific method. These practices often rely on anecdotal evidence, lack falsifiability, and do not undergo rigorous peer review. In the wellness industry, pseudoscience is prevalent, thriving on exaggerated or baseless health claims that appeal to your hopes for quick fixes and easy solutions. The persistence of pseudoscience in the wellness industry is not just a product of misinformation, but deeply rooted in human psychology. Several cognitive and motivational factors drive its prevalence, making it so pervasive and so challenging to counteract. First, we have cognitive biases. A key factor is the illusion of causality, where people perceive a cause and effect relationship between unrelated events. For example, someone might take a supplement and feel better, but it might be due to unrelated factors like improved sleep or reduced stress, and they might incorrectly attribute that positive outcome to the supplement they started. This illusion is reinforced by the lack of immediate side effects in many pseudoscientific remedies, making them feel safer and more effective than they actually are. And actually, I've seen this with prescribed medication too. Too many patients still come to the clinic asking for antibiotics for things like their sinus infections and colds, which are most certainly viral in nearly every single case. They cling to the fact that they felt better in the past after taking antibiotics, missing the main intervention, which is the passage of time. With time, our bodies tend to heal, regardless of the presence of antibiotics, which unfortunately have side effects, both in the short and long term. Individual differences also play a role. People with lower cognitive reflectiveness are more likely to accept pseudoscientific claims without questioning their validity. Colloquially, this might be described as gullibility or an overtrusting nature. Additionally, susceptibility to magical health beliefs or medical conspiracy theories can drive the adoption of unproven practices. Low conscientiousness, which is an attribute that is tested for in personality tests, and also negative experiences with traditional healthcare systems often lead people to seek alternative or complementary remedies, which are often not supported by science. There are also some motivational factors. Uncertain situations, the desire for control and comprehension can make pseudoscientific explanations and treatments appealing. This is particularly true in the wellness space, where promises of empowerment or taking charge resonate deeply. People want to believe they can control their health outcomes, even when the interventions lack scientific credibility. There's also authority and social influence. Perceived authority figures, whether they're influencers or healthcare professionals, can significantly impact the adoption of pseudoscientific beliefs. Biased belief updating process often occurs, where supporting information is preferentially integrated while discrediting evidence is dismissed when the information is being provided by someone who seems authoritative. Group dynamics and identity protective attitudes also play a role. For example, wellness communities often form around shared beliefs, creating this echo chamber where skepticism is discouraged and pseudoscientific ideas flourish. Now let's examine some clear examples of pseudoscience and how it manifests in marketing, social media, and even professional advice. First, we have the problem of cherry-picking data. Many marketing claims often cite a single study. Often poorly designed or funded by the company itself to support sweeping claims. For instance, a supplement might tout a proven benefit based on a small animal study showing improved skin hydration, while ignoring larger human trials that showed no significant effect. Another common example is misrepresenting meta-analyses to highlight only findings that support a product's narrative while omitting contradictory evidence. Then we have anecdotal evidence. Testimonials and dramatic before and after stories are often used as substitutes for real evidence. For example, influencers frequently post glowing skin transformations or weight loss journeys attributed to a specific supplement without disclosing their other lifestyle changes like diet or exercise that likely contributed to the results. These anecdotes create an emotional appeal that feels credible but lacks scientific rigor. Then we have implied benefits. Some claims rely on vague or suggestive language to imply benefits without directly stating them. For instance, a supplement might claim it supports immune health without providing any evidence of how or whether it actually improves immune function. Terms like helps boost energy or may promote longevity often suggest outcomes unsubstantiated by clinical data. Next, you want to watch out for scientific jargon without substance. Using terms like mitochondrial optimization or DNA repair without explaining what they mean or providing context can make a product seem legitimate while obscuring the lack of real evidence. For instance, beauty serums that promise to activate telomerase, exploit technical sounding language without providing any meaningful biological impact on aging. Then we have overgeneralization. Claims that something works for everyone or targets multiple unrelated conditions are red flags. For example, some dietary supplements claim to improve brain health, support digestion, and reduce inflammation, a really broad set of benefits rarely validated in a single intervention. This is a personal peeve of mine because it's so rampant among the social media influencer community and even in clinical settings. Even coaches and clinicians are human too, and we're subject to cognitive biases that lead us to overgeneralize interventions. This often stems from that illusion of causality, seeing patterns where none exist, or the influence of authority figures. In the case of clinicians, that's higher authority figures like more senior clinicians. We're often drawn to simple solutions, but in reality, personalization is key to effective wellness interventions. I want to go over some quick examples of how psychological drivers have really promoted pseudoscience. First, there's the detox craze. Detox products thrive on the illusion of causality. A person drinks a detox tea, feels lighter due to dehydration, and attributes the cleanse to toxin removal, despite no evidence of toxins being identified or ever removed. Motivational factors like desire to recover faster or extend lifespan can make interventions like cryotherapy appealing. The dramatic experience of standing in a freezing chamber reinforces a sense of efficacy, even though scientific support for systemic benefits is lacking. Influencers endorsing anti-aging supplements create an authority bias. Consumers trust the influencer's experience over scientific data, leading to widespread adoption of unproven products. This is absolutely rampant in the supplement world. Adding to the problem are influencers and clinicians who promote products without disclosing their lack of scientific expertise or the presence of financial incentives. Many influencers present themselves as authorities, sharing personal success stories along with their affiliate links. And this happens in clinics too. Big pharma reps are paid handsomely for developing relationships with doctors and offering them free education and samples for their patients. And in the recent past, doctors were lured in with expensive vacations and other ludicrous incentives, although luckily the most egregious of these practices have stopped with recent regulation. This cycle prioritizes profit over evidence, making it even harder for consumers to discern what's credible. Pseudoscience doesn't just waste time and money, it can have real consequences for health. Many people who try pseudoscientific interventions end up disillusioned or worse, harmed. This erosion of trust can also spill over into legitimate science, leading people to dismiss evidence-based solutions alongside scams. Navigating this overwhelming market requires critical thinking and a willingness to dig deeper. Ask questions. Where's the evidence? Who funded the studies? Are the claims too good to be true? The psychology behind pseudoscience highlights the importance of addressing cognitive and motivational biases directly. Understanding that we all, whether as consumers or professionals, are prone to these biases can help us build tools for critical evaluation. Focus on personalized evidence-based solutions rather than one-size-fits-all trends that often fail to deliver. True progress in longevity and wellness comes from separating hype from reality. Now, let's explore how to do exactly that by building your own framework for making informed decisions. So knowing that the world we live in is rife with pseudoscience, how do you cut through the noise? The foundations of rational biohacking is grounded in the scientific method and requires you to apply real critical thinking skills. First, we need to use the scientific method as your roadmap for biohacking. It's not just for white-coated researchers in a lab. It's a practical framework for testing ideas and learning what truly works for your unique biology. But here's the thing. In real life, it's not as rigid as the step-by-step diagrams you might remember from school. It's a guide, not a rule book, and it evolves as you learn. So let's break it down. First, ask a question that is specific and focused. Instead of, why am I tired all the time? Try something actionable, like, does intermittent fasting improve my energy levels? Specific questions lead to specific answers. The question can be inspired by anything at all. This creativity is vital for all scientists, even for scientists conducting experiments on just one subject, you. Next, do your homework. Dig into credible sources, peer-reviewed studies, trusted experts, and legitimate science. Be cautious of flashy testimonials or Instagram posts that promise too much. I'll go over later in this episode how to evaluate your sources properly. Then comes the fun part, formulating a hypothesis. This is where you make an educated guess about what might happen. Maybe you think, if I fast for 16 hours daily, I'll feel more energized in the afternoons because of improved blood sugar regulation. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be testable. Now, design your experiment. Simplicity is your best friend here. Test one variable at a time and track your progress carefully. For example, if you're testing fasting, keep your sleep, exercise, and diet as consistent as possible. This is so hard for everyone, and I can completely relate. It's so tempting to just go and try 5 things at once when you're on a health optimization spree. But then you can end up with a dozen new supplements and not know what is exactly helping. So try to be deliberate here. Once you're set up, start the experiment. And importantly, collect and analyze your data. Whether it's sleep scores from a wearable or a simple energy log, look for patterns. But don't overanalyze every blip. Focus on meaningful trends. I use a spreadsheet for most of my own personal experiments, but you can try different apps available for logging if you prefer. Finally, after the experiment is over, draw your conclusions and iterate. Maybe fasting does help your energy, or maybe it doesn't. Either way, you've learned something valuable about your body. Tweak your approach and try again. But stay diligent and stick to the main principles of the scientific method. But the reality is, N of 1 experiments are really tricky. First of all, your body doesn't exist in a vacuum. Designing experiments on yourself means dealing with confounders, those pesky variables that muddy the waters. Let's say you're a shift worker with an ever-changing sleep schedule, or you're dealing with hormonal fluctuations because you have a menstrual cycle. Or maybe you're a frequent traveler, constantly bouncing between time zones and different ecosystems. These factors make it tough to pin down what's causing the changes in how you feel. And then there's the issue of adaptation. Your body is dynamic. It's always adjusting and recalibrating. That's why you might feel amazing on a new supplement for the first week, only to see the effects fade. It's not that the supplement necessarily stopped working in principle. It's just that your biology adapted. For example, melatonin works really well to help people fall asleep, but usually only has an effect for the first few days. And then people need to either ramp up their dose or add on something new due to their bodies adapting to the new source of melatonin or even making less of their own. This is actually why I typically only recommend melatonin for people who need to temporarily change their sleep-wake cycles, such as in shift work or with jet lag. But this problem occurs with all different kinds of interventions. GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic or Zepbound, whose doses we need to ramp up month to month to get continued weight loss, and even strength training, which you need to maintain or increase to see continued gains. It's not a bad thing. It's just something you need to recognize to understand your body. The key is to approach your experiments with patience and humility. You won't always get clear answers, but every test gets you closer to understanding your unique biology. This is where critical thinking shines. It's your safety net, helping you navigate the gray areas of self-experimentation. When results aren't clear, ask yourself, am I accounting for all the variables? Maybe your sleep improved, but was it the magnesium supplement, or was it the fact that you started going to bed earlier? Could it be a placebo effect? The mind is powerful, and believing in a treatment can sometimes be enough to see a benefit. Am I looking long enough? Am I looking at an intervention for a long enough timeline? Some changes take weeks or even months to show real results. Critical thinking isn't about being a skeptic for skepticism's sake. It's about staying curious and honest with yourself. And finally, don't go at this alone. Share your findings with others, friends, online communities, or even a health coach. Scientists do this all the time with their lab group or by talking to others from different institutions. Collaboration can bring fresh perspectives and help you see connections you might have missed. Rational biohacking isn't about finding definitive answers. It's about starting conversation with your body, one experiment at a time. You'll make mistakes, and that's okay. Each one teaches you something new. The scientific method gives you structure, and critical thinking keeps you honest. Together, they create a framework for exploring your health in a way that's both rigorous and flexible. So go ahead and experiment, but do it with curiosity, care, and the understanding that the journey is just as valuable as the destination. Now, let's zoom out and address the big question. Why does biohacking exist in the first place? If traditional research were perfect, there might not be such a need for this movement. But as someone who's worked within the conventional medical research system, I've seen its vast limitations firsthand. Conventional medicine is exceptional at diagnosing and treating diseases, but it often falls short when it comes to optimizing health or addressing individual variability. The same goes for science. Too often, the most prestigious papers only address disease states, and the best funded research is often conducted by big pharma companies. As a result, most regular people feel unheard, constrained by the standard of care guidelines that prioritize population-level evidence over personalized interventions and emphasize pharmacologics that are backed by expensive studies. Biohacking at its core is an answer to that gap, a way for individuals to take control of their health and push beyond the limits of traditional healthcare and science. But the key is that biohacking should complement, not completely replace, evidence-based medicine. Rational biohacking is not about rejecting good science in healthcare. It's about using its strengths while filling in gaps with personalized logical experimentation. Like we just went over, we need to start with a foundation rooted in critical thinking. And this means we also need to understand how to evaluate evidence, both published scientific papers and anecdotal data. Scientific evidence is the backbone of rational biohacking. Without it, you're navigating in the dark. But not all evidence is created equal, and understanding the hierarchy of evidence is crucial for separating good information from bad. Let's break it down. At the top of the ladder, you'll find systemic reviews and meta-analyses. These are like a big picture summary of all the reliable research that's been done. They're often considered the gold standard because they combine data from multiple studies, giving you a balanced view. However, they're only as good as the studies they include. As the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. If the included studies are poorly designed or biased, the review itself might be misleading. Not to mention, sometimes the protocols and designs of the included studies are too different, meaning the resulting meta-analyses can oversimplify findings by combining data that isn't entirely comparable. This leads to conclusions that don't apply to every individual. Take, for example, the meta-analyses evaluating omega-3 fatty acids for heart health. While these studies combine data from numerous trials, discrepancies in dosage and participant health status can lead to mixed conclusions. This leaves room for debate and confusion about the true efficacy of omega-3s. A step down the ladder is randomized controlled trials, or RCTs. These are experiments where people are randomly assigned to groups. Some get the intervention while others don't. This design helps eliminate bias and gives us stronger conclusions. For example, if you're wondering whether intermittent fasting boosts energy, an RCT would compare groups fasting and not fasting under similar conditions. However, RCTs aren't perfect. They're often expensive, limited in scope, and conducted in controlled settings that don't reflect real-life conditions. They also tend to focus on averages, which might not capture individual variability. A great example is the Diabetes Prevention Program, which was an RCT that compared lifestyle changes to metformin use for diabetes prevention. The findings were groundbreaking, but they highlighted that real-world adherence to such interventions can be a significant challenge. Further down, you'll find observational studies like cohort and case control studies. These look at patterns in real-world settings, but they don't control for variables as strictly. They're great for spotting trends, but much less reliable for proving cause and effects. Think of these as showing correlations, like people who eat more veggies tend to live longer without necessarily proving why. The main flaw here is the potential for confounding variables, factors that aren't accounted for but could explain the observed relationship. For example, people who eat more veggies might also exercise more or have better access to healthcare. Another example is the Framingham Heart Study, which has been invaluable in medicine for providing insights for cardiovascular health. For example, it provided a link between cholesterol levels and heart disease, but because it's observational, it can't prove that lowering cholesterol directly prevents heart attacks. It only shows the correlation. Finally, at the bottom of the research evidence totem pole, there are case reports and expert opinions. These are anecdotal and often reflect one person's experience or a professional's perspective. While they're interesting and can spark ideas, they're not enough to base major decisions on. The biggest issue with these is the lack of generalizability. What works for one person might not work for another, and the high likelihood of bias, especially if the expert has an vested interest in a particular outcome. Consider a case report detailing a rare reaction to Rapamycin, which is a drug being explored for its potential to extend lifespan. While it's intriguing, a single case can't establish safety or efficacy across the board. And even the best evidence can have flaws. Look for red flags, like studies being funded by the company selling the product being tested. Check if the sample size, the number of people involved, is big enough to trust the results. And ask if the findings have been replicated in other studies. One flashy headline doesn't mean much if no one else can back it up. Now I want to talk about animal studies. Animal studies are often where scientific research begins. They help us understand basic biology and test hypotheses before moving to human trials. And with longevity science, which would take literal generations to come to solid conclusions with human studies, we often need to rely on animal models if we expect to apply the interventions while they're relevant. That is, while we're still alive. However, it's essential to recognize their limitations, including the specific issues tied to the animals and the models used. First, think about where the animals come from. Most lab animals, like mice and rats, come from highly controlled breeding environments. These animals are genetically similar across the board to ensure consistency across experiments. While this makes them ideal for identifying basic mechanisms, it also introduces limitations. Lab mice, for example, often lack the genetic diversity seen in humans, which means their responses to interventions might not mirror what happens in a diverse human population. Additionally, lab conditions like standardized diets and stress-free environments don't reflect the complexities of real life, where factors like diet, environment, and social stress can influence results. There are also species-specific limitations. Different species are used for different purposes in research. Mice and rats are the most common models due to their low cost and fast reproduction. However, their short lifespans and metabolic differences from humans can make it challenging to extrapolate their results directly to us. Yeast and worms are simple organisms used to study aging and cellular mechanisms because they have exceptionally short life cycles. And they offer great insights into fundamental biology, but too far removed from human complexity. Dogs and cats have been used in studies because they live in similar environments as humans, and they have greater similarities in terms of their organs. However, there are more ethical concerns which limit their use. Finally, we have non-human primates. These are the closest models to humans and are used for more complex studies like neurological research. However, their ethical and cost considerations make them less commonly used, and even they can have species-specific differences that limit generalizability. So animal studies are most useful when they align with other evidence. If particular intervention has shown promise in animals and there's some preliminary human data, it might be worth experimenting cautiously. Look for studies that focus on mechanism relevant to your goals, like cellular repair, inflammation, or metabolic health. When you're applying results from animal studies to humans, consider dosage scaling. You've got to be careful with dosages. Humans are larger and metabolize substances differently, so direct translations aren't reliable. Use resources like the surface area scaling factor to estimate appropriate human doses, and do this with your doctor. We see a lot of problems. For example, I remember back in the day, we used to think resveratrol was this great drug, and since it's found in the skin of grapes, maybe drinking lots and lots of wine would be helpful for longevity. But if you scale up the dosage that's necessary for humans, that means drinking so many bottles of wine that surely it would kill you before you got even the most minor benefits from the resveratrol. Next, look for replication. Has a particular study been repeated in different models with variations? Consistency really strengthens findings. Finally, combine evidence. Don't rely solely on one animal study or even animal studies as a whole. Use them as part of a broader body of evidence, including human studies and anecdotal case reports. Rapamycin's popularity in the longevity community illustrates how strong animal data can drive significant excitement. Studies across multiple animal models have shown that rapamycin can extend lifespan. The extended lifespan has been proven in mouse models, and it can have additional benefits like reduced tumor formation and age-related weight gain. And it's so compelling that the benefits have been replicated from yeast to mice to dogs, hinting at this conserved mechanism through the inhibition of the mTOR pathway. But the key challenge of translating the results to humans is still there. We're still in early human trials, just beginning to investigate rapamycin's effects. So it's critical to remember that animal studies are just a starting point. Now let's talk about anecdotes, the stories you hear from friends, influencers, or even healthcare providers. These stories can be tempting because they feel personal and relatable. But how do you decide if they're useful? First, think about who is sharing the story. Is it someone with expertise or just someone with a large following? A doctor sharing a case study has more weight than a random Instagram influencer touting their miracle tea. Also, transparency matters. Is the person being upfront about other factors that might have influenced their outcome? If someone's skin cleared up after using a product, did they also change their diet, start exercising, or stop a medication? Then consider patterns. If many people report similar experiences with a product or practice, that's way more compelling than a one-off story. But these anecdotes should align with basic scientific principles. If a supplement supposedly cured someone's chronic illness overnight, it's worth questioning whether there's the mechanistic basis for this to happen. And like we mentioned before, a big challenge with anecdotes is the presence of confounders, other things happening at the same time that might explain the outcome. Did sleep improve because of magnesium or because a person started going to bed earlier? The placebo effect is also real. Just by believing something will work can make you feel better, even if the intervention itself isn't doing anything. Another critical point is risk assessment. If an anecdote inspires you to try something, weigh the potential downsides. For example, trying a new diet or mindfulness practice is pretty low risk, but taking an unregulated supplement could be harmful. At the very least, most interventions that are being advertised out there cost some money, which is not harm-free. If you are curious enough to try something based on anecdotal evidence, treat it as a true experiment. Keep track of your outcomes, whether it's your energy levels, mood, or sleep quality, and be prepared to stop if it doesn't work or causes issues. That way you're using anecdotes as a starting point, not the final word. Now I want to share one of my own experiences with biohacking where I ran into some major hurdles. Don't worry, nothing seriously horrible happened, but I think it's a really good illustration to explain how even someone who is as knowledgeable as a longevity physician can struggle with the difficulties of N of 1 experimentation. So I've tried different fasting protocols in the past because there's really good evidence supporting caloric restriction for longevity. One time I decided to go hard and try prolonged fasting. So that's fasting with only water to consume for 24 to 36 hours at a time. And I did this every single week for a couple of months. At first, I was really impressed with the results. I had a clear reduction in body fat, which was one of my main goals. The scientific evidence supports this. The main reason for prolonged fasting is really to push your body through that glucose metabolism phase into fat oxidation, resulting in leaner body composition. My energy levels were also another pleasant surprise. They felt stable and even better than usual. I thought that I would maybe feel drained, but instead I found myself really energized. These benefits mirrored what evidence out there shows as benefits for prolonged fasting, and they motivated me to keep going. But as with many things, there was another side to the story. Prolonged fasting also brought some significant downsides that made me rethink whether the practice was worth continuing. Let's start with sleep. This was probably the most frustrating part for me. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night and struggling to fall back asleep for hours. Sleep is such a cornerstone of health and longevity, so this really concerned me. Now, I already have a genetic tendency toward night awakenings and I'm very sensitive to sleep disruptions, so it wasn't easy for me to figure out if fasting was a sole culprit or just making an existing problem worse. Then there was some agitation. Along with feeling much more energy, I also felt jumpy and restless. At first, it wasn't a big deal, but over time it became harder to ignore. It was like my nervous system was on high alert, which wasn't exactly the calm, focused energy I was hoping for. So this was likely tied to the elevated cortisol levels that come with fasting, since your body thinks you're in a state of stress and makes more of this stress hormone. And finally, the most alarming downside was hair shedding. A few months into the experiment, I started noticing more hair coming out than usual. This was definitely unexpected and pretty distressing. Not to mention, because it takes a few months for hair to go through its natural growth cycles, it's not something that I could notice right away. This delay in effects can be super confusing. Luckily, the shedding stopped after I discontinued the weekly prolonged fasting, and now I'm in the process of regrowing my hair back to its usual volume. Still, it was this clear reminder of how important it is to pay attention to your body's signals and how confusing it can be when you have delayed effects. Figuring out the sleep issue was especially tricky for me because there were so many factors at play. For one, my genetics. I'd always been prone to waking up anyways, so it was hard to say if fasting was the main trigger or just amplifying another problem. On top of that, I had recently started taking some new supplements, partially to prevent malnutrition while fasting, which actually might have been contributing to the overall problem. For example, I was taking creatine, which is fantastic for cognitive benefits as well as for muscle building, but this can sometimes affect sleep in certain sensitive individuals. The studies out there pose it as a benefit of creatine. For example, if you give a person creatine while they're going through an all-nighter, they'll actually think better, as if their brain just doesn't need as much sleep. I'd also been adding on vitamin B12, which supports energy levels, but might theoretically disrupt sleep in some people. And then there were mitochondrial support supplements like CoQ10 and PQQ, which enhance energy production, but could have been messing with energy enough to be detrimental to sleep. Any one of these could have been a factor, so isolating the cause was not straightforward. This whole experiment taught me a lot, and it shaped how I approach biohacking, both for myself and my patient. First of all, tracking is everything. If you're not keeping tabs on your sleep, mood, energy levels, and any changes in supplementation and other interventions while you're trying a certain biohacking experiment, you're flying blind. For me, tracking helped highlight patterns and identify potential confounders. Second of all, personalization is key. What works wonders for one person, even in some pretty rigorous studies, might not work for you. My genetic predispositions and the supplements that I had started recently played a huge role in how this particular biohacking experiment unfolded. Third, side effects really matter. Hair shedding, for example, isn't just a small thing. It's your body's way of telling you that something's off and it's important to listen. And finally, it's okay to pivot. After weighing the pros and cons, I decided to reduce the frequency of fasting. Now I just do a gentle intermittent fast or time restricted eating, and I focus on other strategies for energy and fat loss that were much less disruptive. This adjustment let me keep some of the benefits without sacrificing my sleep or overall well being. So, my personal biohacking experience gave me valuable insights into how my body responds to stress, energy demands, and dietary changes. For anyone considering fasting or some other biohacking protocol, I'd say start slow, monitor how you're feeling, and be ready to adapt. At the end of the day, biohacking is all about what works for you. If you're experimenting with biohacking, it's also essential to keep your doctor in the loop. While biohacking is about personal empowerment, medical guidance can provide that safety net you need to avoid unintended consequences, especially if you have underlying health conditions or are already taking different medications. Navigating these conversations can feel daunting, especially if you're concerned about being misunderstood or dismissed. And I totally get that, having heard it from so many patients coming to me from more traditional practices. Here are some practical strategies to foster an open conversation with your doctor. Start with transparency. When you're bringing up biohacking, start by being open with what you're doing and why. Share your motivations, whether it's improving energy, addressing a specific health concern, or experimenting with longevity strategies. For example, instead of saying, I'm taking these supplements to boost my health, you might say, I've been reading about mitochondrial health and I'm trying CoQ10 and PQQ to support energy levels. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Being upfront helps frame the conversation as collaborative rather than confrontational. Most providers want to support your health goals, even if they're unfamiliar with the particular information. And before your appointment, research the interventions you're trying or considering. You want to use credible resources like peer-reviewed studies, medical websites, or trusted experts in the field. Bring a summary of this information to your appointment to show that you've approached the topic thoughtfully. For example, if you're experimenting with intermittent fasting, you'll want to mention that you've reviewed studies on its effects on metabolic health and are monitoring your blood sugar and energy levels. Providers are much more likely to engage with your biohacking experiments if they see you're making evidence-based decisions. Also, you'll want to speak their language. Medical professionals are trained to think in terms of risks, benefits, and evidence. Frame your questions and updates in these terms. Instead of saying, I'm trying this supplement because I saw it on social media, you can say, I'm curious about this supplement because I've read it supports mitochondrial function. Are there any risks I should be aware of? This approach shows that you're open to hearing about potential downsides and value the doctor's expertise, which can help build trust. Also, use your clinicians and ask them for monitoring support. If you're trying a new protocol, you'll want to track relevant metrics. If you're experimenting with fasting, for example, ask your doctor if they can run periodic blood tests to monitor your glucose, insulin, and other metabolic markers. And if you're exploring a supplement or a medication like Rapamycin, ask them if they can help track your Rapamycin levels or insulin, glucose, and lipid levels, which might be affected by taking Rapamycin. Doctors are much more likely to engage if they see an opportunity to ensure your safety while providing you with valuable data. And finally, acknowledge their expertise. Recognize that your clinician's training and clinical experience gives them a broad perspective on health. Even if they're not familiar with the particular biohacking protocol, their insights can help you navigate potential pitfalls. If they raise a concern about a supplement's interaction with a medication you're taking, for example, take this feedback seriously. You'll want to also be open to pushback. Not all doctors are going to be enthusiastic about biohacking, and that's okay. Some might have concerns about safety or lack of evidence for certain interventions. Instead of becoming defensive, ask questions to understand their perspective. For example, ask them, what are your main concerns about this approach? Are there alternative strategies you would recommend for achieving similar goals? This shows that you're open-minded and willing to consider their advice, even if it challenges your plans. You'll also want to build a supportive team. If your primary doctor is dismissive or uninterested, consider finding additional support from other professionals. For example, functional medicine doctors or longevity physicians may be more familiar with biohacking protocols. Nutritionists or dietitians will be more helpful for dietary experiments, and fitness trainers or physical therapists will be much more helpful for exercise-related interventions. Having a team of supportive professionals can really provide you a broader range of perspectives and resources. Biohacking is a journey, and your experiments are likely to evolve over time. Keep your professionals updated on what you're trying and any results you might have observed. This ongoing communication helps your provider stay in the loop and gives them opportunities to offer insights or adjustments as needed. By being transparent, doing your research, and framing the conversation as a collaboration, you can build a productive partnership that supports your health goals. Remember, your doctors and other professionals' expertise are valuable resources. Now let's wrap things up with some actionable takeaways to help you get started on your rational biohacking journey. The key is to balance curiosity with science and make small, deliberate changes that align with your goals. goals. Here are a few quick steps to take. First, start with a question. Ask yourself, what's the one thing you want to improve right now? Whether it's more energy, better sleep, or fat loss, having a clear focus will make your experiments more effective. For example, instead of thinking, I want to feel better, try, how can I improve my energy in the afternoons? Second, keep it simple. Don't try to change everything at once. Pick one variable to test, like adjusting your diet, trying a new fasting protocol, or adding a single supplement. Simplicity makes it easier to pinpoint what's working. Next, you'll want to track your progress. Use a journal, app, or spreadsheet to log your results. Record key metrics like your energy levels, sleep quality, mood, and physical changes. You'll also want to include events like travel or your menstrual cycle. Tracking helps you see patterns and ensures you're making data-driven decisions. And as a general principle, start low and go slow. Whether you're introducing a supplement, a fasting window, or a new workout routine, start with small, manageable changes. Gradually increase intensity or dosage as you observe your body's response. You're going to want to test, tweak, and repeat. Treat biohacking as an ongoing experiment. If something isn't working, don't get discouraged. Adjust and try again. For example, if fasting impacts your sleep, consider modifying the timing or duration of your fast. And always prioritize safety. You'll want to research potential risk and consult with a doctor before trying new interventions. This is especially important for supplements or protocols that might interact with existing health conditions or medications. And like I mentioned, collaborate and learn from others. Biohacking doesn't have to be a solo journey. At least join an online community or find a mentor or talk to a longevity doctor who's open to your goals. Sharing your experiences can offer fresh insights and support. Celebrate your small wins. Progress doesn't have to be monumental to matter. Celebrate wins like waking up feeling more refreshed or hitting a personal best at a gym. These are signs that you're moving in the right direction. Biohacking is about exploring what works best for you. It's not about quick fixes or following trends. It's about understanding your body and making informed decisions to optimize your health. So stay curious, stay patient, and enjoy the process of discovery. Every small experiment is a step toward unlocking your full potential.